about your grandmother?
Oh my God, she was wonderful. She was a Southern woman through and through, and she was a total lady, and she was a second grade school teacher. And I remember one time when I came home from school, I'd been playing sports and I got in a little altercation with somebody else, and she goes, "Ladies don't fight." And I'm like, I've never been called a lady before.
That's sweet.
But
You know,
she was wonderful.
and she had a friend named Queen Victoria, or do I
She
have that right?
did.
Yes.
She did. There was a woman named Queen Victoria. We called her QV. And she was an African American woman, and that is her. Her husband had worked for the railroad, and when he passed away, he didn't have a pension. I don't know if they let African American men have a pension back then in the Deep South. So my grandmother and all her school teacher friends, who were all widow women, got together and put together a retirement fund for her, and she would come over on Saturdays and help my grandmother iron hankies and stuff like that. Well, really, they'd make a pot of coffee and they'd sit at the kitchen table and they'd talk a lot, and that was actually her best friend at the time.
Was she like your aunt?
Pretty much, you
Yeah.
know. And my grandmother had taken on a 12-year-old, child who had been through a severe abuse at the time, and she put me in AA, art and athletics, was trying to, which worked. But anyway, I think that she had her hands full. She was a much older woman, and QV helped her raise me. And so I would give her a ride home. When I started driving, I would give her a ride home because she didn't drive as I got older. And she was the first person to tell me about Dr. Martin Luther King, who I'd never heard of before. And so I'll never forget those conversations. And one day when I gave her a ride home, I was in college then at the time, and I did not have a project for my painting jury. In fact, I'd been skipping class because I didn't like the painting instructor, and I didn't have anything ready. And I saw an old screen door beside her house. And I asked her about it, and she goes, "Well, my son replaced the door. Would you like this one?" So I stayed up for 3 days and painted that and got an A in painting.
What about the other doors?
Yeah, and it started a trend because for 30 years I have done this door series, and they've been collected all around the world at this point.
And what are they? What are you trying to say? Are you saying one thing with them, or are you saying several things with them?
Well, I've painted a few of people I know. Most of them are images from the Library of Congress, that are not copyrighted and stuff, and I'll look at kind of the time period. I remember the old mercantile stores when I was a child and things like that, and I really liked them. And so I tried to tell the story of the South through them. I like old advertising and things like that. So I've done altogether, there's been over 100 of them painted over the 30-year
Wow.
time period, and they're registered. Yeah.
When I look at them, I see you're making people who didn't get any real attention.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. Like they deserve the attention you're giving them.
Yeah.
Which I think is a wonderful quality, because they're not famous, they're not people but they existed and they had worth, and you can tell by the humble way in which it's presented.
No, thank you.
I'm fascinated by this particular sculpture. We'll go back and forth from your art.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could tell me about this, I'd be very curious. What's a sugar shack, and what role did it play?
I was reading about the Black Belt in Alabama. I've had 2 shows at the Rosa Parks Museum down in Montgomery. I spend quite a bit of time down there. And so I was going into the city one day, and I was reading about the Black Belt and the history of the Black Belt in Alabama and civil rights and all that. And in 1965, when the Voting Rights Act passed, there wasn't one, well, before that, there wasn't one black registered voter, of course. And after that passed, all Black community met at a place called the Sugar Shack, which was an old mercantile store down in Alabama, and they all voted, and they outvoted the white vote 3-1. And they dressed up in their Sunday best when they did it. And I was so moved by that, and so moved by that photograph, that I created this. And I wanted to do a kind of a model, a replica of it, to talk about it, because these things are not talked about. This is part of the history that has been whitewashed out.
Yeah.
And so I called a guy that's head of the historical society in that area after I did this piece, and I asked him, I said, "Is the location marked with a marker? Because that's a pretty big deal." He goes, "No." And he was real
That's so
short.
often the case.
Oh yeah. And
especially
so
through the South.
Yeah, it's just been erased.
Right.
You know?
People will buy property in Florida having no idea that there'll be like oh, that was a lynching tree, or oh,
Right.
that was that. All that stuff is gone. That used to be where that residence is where there used to be a burial ground.
Well,
Yeah,
and sometimes they do know,
yeah.
and they
And they don't care.
yeah they don't care.
Yeah,
So I wanted to tell the
point.
story, and that's why I did that piece.
It looks sweet. And there are two questions I have for you here.
Okay.
One is explain what we're looking at, and then talk to me afterwards about the significance of crows. What does that mean?
Okay, the metal thing you're seeing right there is an old ballot box from South Arkansas, and it's very very old. It's got a curved piece of metal underneath it. It's handmade because they used to strap these on the back of mules and walk them to the rural communities where people could vote. They wanted to encourage people to vote. I'm sure it was all white people, but still, they wanted them to vote instead of like now they try to keep people from voting. And
Right.
so I thought it was a really cool piece to talk about that. And so I did the crows on top of it to represent Jim Crow because, and when I created this, all the ballots were being contested, going, oh, it's fraud. Oh, these people were dead. Oh, they're not real. And so I recorded my voice on a little recorder on the inside and put a little infrared eye on it. When you walk by it, it screams the word fraud. And I got a call from the Rosa Parks Museum. They're like, "You're scaring everyone with this." I said, "They should be scared."
Yeah. But what's it like growing up in the South?
Yeah, pretty much. I saw that photograph when I was at the Lincoln Memorial. They have a history of the civil rights movement in one of their little museums down there. And pretty much it's still that way in some areas down there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In the South. The South is pretty far behind. It's very advanced as far as some of the Fortune 500 companies that are there, and they try to bring people in from elsewhere, to work and everything else.
Right.
But most of the rural areas are still just like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you were a kid, did you feel that? Did you experience it? I think I remember you telling a story about your birthday party where you
Yeah.
invited a friend.
Um,
Tell that story.
yeah, well, Central High School happened in '57, I believe, is when it was, and they gave the state of the public school system in the state like 10 years to desegregate.
Right.
It didn't happen immediately in '57, and so in '68 I started first grade, and that was the last year, and so we had our first black child in the class then. She was very sweet, and I invited her to my birthday party. And so all of a sudden, the phone starts ringing, and all these parents are backing out and saying, my child's not going to come to that birthday party. And I heard the N word for the first time, and I didn't even know what that meant. And so I think 3 children showed up to that party, and she was one of them. And her father pulled up in an old pickup truck, and she got out in a beautiful yellow dress.
Do you remember her name?
I do. Her name was Darla.
Darla.
And we graduated together. And if I went to my class reunions, I'm sure she would still be there.
Now, VL stands for Vicky Lynette, which makes me think that your mom and dad didn't care whether you were a boy or a girl as long as you were a country western singer.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Did you disappoint them did you ever play?
I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I lip synced in the church choir for 3 years just so my grandmother wouldn't be disappointed.
Okay. It's a great name. I mean, really, it couldn't be more southern if you tried. What about Bob?
Oh God, Bob Ballinger. there's several of those you're going to hear about here
Please.
tonight.
Explain to them what you're up against, essentially, with a person like Bob Ballinger. He was a representative of Arkansas, and it's sort of like the beginning of the renaissance of you here.
Yeah, pretty much.
Please,
yeah,
if
Bob
you could tell.
Ballinger, Senator Jason Rapart. There's a whole slew of them down there. And they were the ones who were pushing all these horrible discriminatory bills that hit us in 2015.
And one of them was House Bill 1228.
HB 1228.
Yes.
Yeah.
For people, I'm sure people up here don't know what that was about. So if you could describe what it was that HB 1228 was trying to do.
It was one of the religious freedom bills that was very badly written. Indiana was having one pushed through at the same time. Mike Pence was governor
Mike
then.
Pence was.
And he was the father of instrumental in kind of putting that together, along with ALEC, which is the American Legislative whatever, exchange, whatever. Anyway, federalism, and they're pushing that through. And so basically what both of those bills were, and Indiana was fighting it as well too. These guys brought it in I think March of 2015. Is that they made it basically to where it'd be like Jim Crow laws would come back overnight. They were trying to push back against the gay marriage, is what it was.
Right, and
Yeah.
and the way when she was phrased, it was they were reclaiming their rights to exercise their religion as they saw fit under
Right.
that broad umbrella. That
Right.
means they could exercise discrimination if, for example, you didn't fit their religious ideals.
It was the same verbiage used during slavery, and up from that moment on as well. It was terrible, but it was so badly written they made it to where not only African Americans but LGBTQ, Jewish people for sure, Muslims, immigrants, they could refuse life-saving medical care or a sandwich in a restaurant if they wanted to. To this day, I can be denied life-saving medical care or a sandwich in a restaurant because we beat that bill back. It was changed, and we got the worst parts out of it. But during COVID, they pushed it through again, which is the reason I'm here in New York now. And Lisa Linsky, right there, one of my best friends. I called her and said, I can't live like this.
So it's a constant fight.
Got me up here.
It's a constant fight.
They're still fighting down there.
And who are they? I mean, who are the people? Who do you see behind these representatives that's doing all this, that feels the need to put women back behind their aprons?
The Heritage Foundation is one of them.
Okay.
The Federalist Society as well. A lot of the evangelical churches are pouring money into this because they're getting power.
You responded to this bill in what I can only describe as a consummately artistic way. What were you thinking when you? How did the idea for the Doors, the End Hate work, start for you?
Well, it scared me when I saw the bill that they were trying to push through.
Okay.
I never ever have been discriminated against in my life, and I realized my white privilege at that very moment. I called Miss Annie Abrams, who was QV, Queen Victoria's daughter, who is a civil rights activist now in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I said, "What am I going to do? What are we going to do?" She goes, "You fight. You got to fight." Right. And I thought, my God, she's been fighting her whole life. I really realized a lot. And so with all the blather going on with everything, I felt like the only voice I had was my work, my art. And so I wanted to do a door series based on discrimination to show that when you separate people, that we've been down this road before and we don't want to go down this road again. And so I started with not only colored only and white only, but I said BT only, immigrant only, homeless only, veterans only. And at the very end, I had a door that said human beings with chains wrapped around it. And I did the human being letters in 24 karat gold leaf because I wanted it to represent when you separate people, you're denying them human being status. And I got a permit like overnight because I had a friend at the Capitol and set them up on the state Capitol steps.
You're still doing doors.
Still doing doors. I know.
But it's entirely different now.
Yeah. And that's at the Lincoln Memorial. I took them there afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. And this would basically be the moment your life changed.
Well, you can thank the woman at the governor's office who got smart with me when I called to talk to her about it. And I said, "Oh, yeah? I'll just go to Washington, D.C., and I'll tell everybody what you're doing down here."
But you dragged all these doors down with you.
I took them with me. Yeah. They rode in the back of a truck for a few years.
One of the things I noticed in some of the photos that you took of this is, I think it's here, how often people wanted to interact with the doors.
Right.
Pose with the doors, go through the doors, stand behind them, between them, not match up to what you are. If you're white, you would black. It was like a game that people enjoyed playing because they were donning roles. You could see it in the photographs, which makes it a very hands-on, interactive piece of art, which is remarkable. But you weren't doing really that. Your doors were a precursor to that, but this is a giant jump.
Right.
There's no, Library of Congress photos. This is now a statement. And how did it change your life?
Well, when I put them on the state capitol steps and woke up the next day, and they were on Yahoo News in different languages, I went, "Oh no!" And my partner of 20 years at the time said, "Oh my God, what have you done?" Yeah.
But you can't go back now.
You can't go
You
back.
can't go back.
You can't go back. Once you're on this path, civil rights and social justice, and you really realize what's going on, and you can't. It changes you forever. You're never the
There's
same again.
no more portraits and flowers. It's
No, none.
Now you're a real artist, not just a painter. And this is the human beings. Now, did you get in trouble for this one? As I think I understand, did this have issues with this particular door?
Oh, it wasn't this one that got pulled out. It was the LGBT door. Yeah,
Aye.
yeah. They toured for a while. The Longwood Center for the Visual Arts Museum flew in from Virginia to my studio, and they toured the work for 2 years.
Right.
And so it ended up. It went there. Went to the Rosa Parks Museum for the first time, and then it went to the Virginia Holocaust Museum. And then it ended up at the Delta Cultural Center in Helena, Arkansas for the 100-year anniversary of the Lane Massacre, because they were unveiling the memorial then. And when they were there, some ministers got a little worked up over things, and they took the LGBT door and put it in the closet. And they didn't know I was coming in to pay them a visit one day. And I said, "Where's my door?" And
so you have to get the door out of the closet.
So they put it right again. So they put it back out.
That's amazing.
So after it toured for 2 years, and I was on the road for years with these doors, they were censored in my own home state when I came home.
I'm sorry, but that can't but work to your advantage at a certain point. I mean, just their response gives those works power.
Well, the reason the ministers didn't like it is because they said their congregation was asking too many questions.
Really?
Because the whole exhibition was there, and it was very powerful. But, yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Do go on.
That's a story. So while I had the doors on the state capitol steps with some friends of mine, and we were fighting against that bill, my father had a heart attack. And the VA was not far from the Capitol. And so I got the call, he was at the VA, and I left the doors with a friend, and I ran over to his hospital room, and I'm sitting in the room with him. He's got the TV on, very religious man. And this comes on. And so I was outed to everyone in the state of Arkansas at that time. And I said, I was horrified. And I said, "Dad," I said, "I think we need to have a talk." And he just kept looking at the TV set. And I'm over here, he wouldn't look at me. And he goes, "There's nothing to talk about." He goes, "I love you and I'm proud of you, and go back to the Capitol with your friends." And nothing was ever said again about it. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
True story.
You explain yourself.
I know. So I debated on this photo for a while of whether to.
I didn't. I saw it immediately and I threw it right in.
I know it. The HUD contacted me a few years later and asked me for their 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act if I would do a separate set of doors to represent, the categories that represented. And I thought about it for a while, and I talked to my legal counselor over there, and I decided to go ahead and do it. And Ben Carson came out and had his photograph taken with me. And then he wrote this wonderful, just beautiful thing about my work on his blog. And I thought, has he been to my website? There's no way that guy's been to my website.
Was he aware?
I don't know. I have no idea. But he was, I know, he was very charming, but I was guarded a little bit, and I was a little surprised.
Well, it reminds me of a quote from my own family where my grandfather used to say, "Talk especially with your enemies, with people who you don't agree."
Right.
That you find common ground over time, and that what you have in common is far more vital than what you disagree on. And that picture, I thought, kind of made me think of that. That's why I threw it in there.
Yeah, I've tried to do that with the work. I've talked to a lot of different people that believe differently than me. They pray differently than me. They vote differently than me. And me being a closeted introvert, most artists are, going out and talking to hundreds of thousands of people face to face over the years with this body of work has really been it really hasn't been a chore. It's been a blessing, because
Of
I've
course.
realized that 90% of the time we have more in common than we have, our differences.
Now, does pardon me, your sexuality inform your work? I'm looking at this one, for example.
Yes.
Talk to me about this one.
This is a newer piece right here, and this is after Roe versus Wade was overturned.
Oof.
And I had real issues with that. I helped raise my ex-partner's daughter, and she is of childbearing age down in Arkansas, and I worry about her. And so, I really wanted a powerful piece for this. Well, the flag, I haven't told a lot of people, but the flag came from Mitch McConnell's office, which I thought was very appropriate.
That's interesting.
They have a capital flag program that you can go through your senator or congressman or whatever and ask them to send you a flag, and they have somebody go run it up the flagpole at the Capitol, and they take it down, they thank you, and they send it to you. And I thought it was very appropriate that Mitch McConnell's flag was covering her up and intertwined between her legs.
Yeah.
Because he was one of the guys that was pushing this so hard.
I like this piece, but I don't know what it signifies to you. Is it a secret attack? Is that what it is?
Pretty much. That's an old antique horse that I made the base for it and everything else. It was just the horse, but I got it from an antique store in Arkansas. Friends of mine own, and it was covered in leather, but it was really stained. And so I thought, I'm going to try to remove that leather. I'm going to talk to the guys first, though. They said, do it. It's okay. And when I did, the horse had been wrapped in newspaper underneath it. It's very old. And I think it was in Polish. I'm not quite sure, but can't remember. I've got it framed and put up. But when we translated it, it talked about camps, paratroopers, all that stuff. So it was done during the war.
Wow.
And anyway, after the 2016 election, when they were just lying, it just seems like lies were just pouring out of their mouths. And I thought, I know that they don't like gay people. Why is he waving that flag? Stuff like that. So anyway, I've got an old rodent trap, which was the metal part. And I cut a hole in the horse, and I made little crows to represent Jim Crow, but I wanted it to represent a Trojan horse. And that's called Dark Horse because of all the lies and all the deceit and how they were just sliding in and how quickly it became normalized. And so that's what that piece represents.
And it's, okay. Wow. This is on the nose with the Bible hitting the the Coca-Cola. How do you feel about organized religion?
I feel a lot different about it now than I did when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, were you raised with faith?
Yes, my father was a devout Baptist, and he tried to get me to come to a little country Baptist church, and my grandmother swooped in as the devout Presbyterian that she was and rescued me and had me baptized Presbyterian. So I was in the pew every Sunday. I went to Dallas one year and did a ministry down there with feeding Skid Row, and so I was heavily involved in the church when I was young.
And your straying from the church happened at a particular time or just gradually?
Gradually, especially after my grandmother died. But I started questioning things more and more. I'm a very spiritual person. I keep my faith very simple, mainly just be kind to love one another, which was the main commandment, I think. But
yeah,
I'm not too keen on organized religion these days.
No, in fact, this one I think is something to talk about. I love this one. It's like you pick your scripture. It's like pick and choose.
Yeah, the cherry picking is what really turned me off, and it's
Leviticus.
really bad these
Let's
days.
Just pick the ones we want to use to hurt people, and but I think this is kind of genius.
That was an old gaming device, is what it was,
Yes.
and I gutted it and used that case.
Well, isn't it a relief that white supremacy and the Ku Klux Klan are things of the past?
They are so not. I've been saying that for years.
No, you were actually telling me the other day about your talking in a class, and you asked the kids in the class, had anybody been approached online and through games? Please tell these people about this very disturbing trend.
Well, I want to bounce back to for when I did the Doors.
Yeah.
I'd been threatened by a member of the Ku Klux Klan online, a white supremacist, and then he started sending me all this, paraphernalia and all this propaganda and stuff. So I turned him in. I did an online report and turned him into the FBI. And my father gave me a shotgun, and I kept a shotgun by the studio door for 2 years. And so I want to, say that, as well as then come fast forward when I showed at the Virginia Holocaust Museum. They had Christian Piccolini come in and speak during that time, during my exhibition. And he's an ex-white supremacist. He's been on MSNBC, CNN, and all that stuff. When Dylan Roof shot up the Charleston church and killed members of that African-American church years ago, his manifesto had part of Christian's old music lyrics in it. And Christian turned his life around after his son was born. So I want to, put all that in there.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was talking, and we had been busing Virginia school children and teachers in, for this. We'd had teacher workshops for the entire week before this. And I think we bused maybe 400 kids in that day, junior high and high school. And Christian spoke, and at the end he said, if any of you have been approached by any white supremacist organizations in your hallway at school, online gaming, anything like that, please come talk to me afterwards. And I've done a lot of research on all this stuff that I do, and it's very dark things. And so not much shocks me anymore. And when I saw how many kids stood up, my jaw hit the ground. While we're fighting over Drag Queen Story Hour, which I think is a 100%, just to keep you preoccupied, they're recruiting our children. Everyone keeps saying, oh, well, this generation, it's their last gasp and blah. That's not true. At this point, they've recruited 2 more generations of young kids, especially young males. And social economic status doesn't matter.
No, I would imagine that a harder life would be a better petri dish for this kind of hate.
Yeah. I went to Pittsburgh several months ago for the United Nations Global Eradicate Hate Conference, and I was really blown away at what I learned. And that shook me up so much I came back early. That was really intense things. People from all over the world came to that too. But one of the things that reminded me of that Virginia Holocaust Museum moment is one day I was listening to a panel, and they were showing the graphics and the music. They're using music and graphics to recruit these young males. And it was so intense, and it makes them feel macho. It makes them feel, their adrenaline surging and pounding music and all that stuff. 100%. But they're recruiting all around the world. But they're recruiting in our backyard. They're recruiting here right now, I assure you.
Wow. What are some of the images that they use to capture people's attention?
Well, they were burning a pride flag in this one, and all the guys were dancing around and clapping and all this stuff with a flaming pride flag and making them think that's cool, that's macho and all this stuff.
Also, just the fact that the games generally give permission to violence or
right.
permission to
right.
physical, solving problems through power of force.
Right, 100%.
That itself is not helpful, to put it mildly. I have another question for you, which is off this topic a little bit. Is that when you went when you created the End Hate Doors, your work sort of shifted, not totally, don't get me wrong, but shifted from galleries to institutions, to museums. And your work wasn't so much something like a commodity that you would sell, so much as a tour that you would rent, or a tour. And I'm kind of curious how you feel about your life as an artist now, approaching or being approached by institutions that want to show your work, as opposed to the hand-to-mouth quality of being an artist who's selling, a framed canvas.
It was a big transition. The work has definitely been on the museum level at this point. There are some galleries that definitely will show that kind of work. The ones in Arkansas are not too keen on it. In fact, when I did the first round of the Murder of Crows, which is the first exhibition with some of these pieces, with the Doors and several other pieces as well, I had to rent a building and show it myself. And then all the galleries shut down, and they all came to the show, and I'm like, wait a minute, So, but you know,
got to keep their
yeah, we're all friends. I know everybody down there. But it's a red state, and that was real different. I do think there's galleries that will show some of it, and several of the pieces have been picked up by high-end collectors.
And you work with the Rosa Parks Museum?
I do. I work with them often. I've become very good friends with them. They're a very small museum, but to be such a small museum, they have an incredibly large and very powerful international presence.
That's
People
incredible.
from all over the world come down to Montgomery, and especially for the Equal Justice Initiative, the monuments down there, and they have an incredible museum. And then the Rosa Parks is not far from there.
And there's a civil rights museum in Hope, in Arkansas. I'm not sure where it is.
A Civil Rights Museum.
The Civil Rights Museum. Anyone can help me with that?
No, I don't think so.
No. We'll Google it later. But I would imagine that you will be approached by groups like this who want to show your message.
Yeah, I've shown with the Rosa Parks twice now, and have been invited back sometime in 2025 to show again with a new body of work. And they'll end up paying the transport and things like that. But when you do make that transition, it's a little more hand to mouth. I work 2 or 3 different jobs now on the side as well as doing my art, so which is tough. But it's important. I feel the work is important.
Yeah. Well, at some point, will those doors at some place in time come to rest?
I hope so.
And you finally get the check.
I hope so. Well, it's not just the check, but it's they need to be seen. I believe that they belong to the public, honestly.
But outside some good civil rights museum or Rosa Parks Museum or something,
I hope so.
That would be where it would be appropriate.
Because they've traveled. I quit counting a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, but they've traveled, 150, maybe almost 200,000 miles now. Wow. They've traveled a lot.
Jeez.
They were in the back of a pickup truck before the museum started picking them up. We were driving them around the state of Arkansas, getting equality ordinance passed when they were trying to crack down on all these bills, these discriminatory bills. And so we'd drive them to Hot Springs, we'd drive them to Eureka Springs, and then right before a vote, throw them in the back of the truck, and we'd drive them somewhere else. And so we did that for a while.
Well, I can see how those doors would be a great political tool just to remind people.
Well, I'll tell you what else happened with them. So I did after visiting DC, and I went to the National Archives, I saw a tiny little it was a little graphic that was the 4 pillars of freedom, Right. And so I went back and found some old columns in Arkansas. They were huge columns, and I replicated those. I did a giant, huge installation of those. And I contacted the state capitol, and I said, I'd like to get a permit. I want to put these down there. And the lady on the phone, and I remember who she was, she started whispering. She goes, they're not going to give you a permit. She said they weren't expecting the negative response they got after those doors, because it really put the pressure on the politicians. And so I was banned from the state capitol for 2 years in Arkansas with my work until the ACLU caught wind of it and threatened to sue everybody down there. Wow. And so now...
That's a big hand.
Yeah.
Wow. You're like a hero of the civil rights movement.
Seriously.
These days.
Total hero.
Now, I just want to tell you, I want to tell you what I think about this, because it looks like an America that is drained, baggy, tired, weak, like used up tea bags, which is what this is made out of. Is that your feeling about America? Is sort of that it's on its last dip?
I actually did that with those thoughts in mind, but it wasn't America. It was the stain that the Tea Party has done to America.
Of course.
So, and that's why the tea bags, but that's over 606 tea bags, handmade tea bags made out of Bible pages. And I know, and I talked to a Baptist minister, a Presbyterian minister, and a devout Catholic friend of mine who I respect a great deal. And I said, what do you think about me doing this project? And I wasn't asking permission, but I really I try to pull advisors in when I do, controversial work. And they said, well, they all three said the same thing. People take pages from the Bible every single day and use it to harm others. And you're showing that this is not okay. So go for it.
Yeah.
And so those are Bible pages that are made into tea bags with black tea inside of them and that were stained down. And these are little tea party insignias hanging down for the little tea tags.
So how did you get the different colors? Just
I hand stained it after that.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. America.
Yeah, now that.
Don't sit down.
This is during COVID. I did this piece, and I was on an urban farm in North Little Rock, Arkansas, where my studio was. It was an old abandoned Catholic orphanage, and they had turned it into an urban farm and some art studios. I started the art studio program there. And so they had an old, what's it called, a crown of thorns tree or bush, out back, and they had cut it down. And so I went and harvested some of the thorns, and that's a very old flag that I took apart. And I just felt like that's exactly what it felt like at that time. After,
right.
After the elections and everything was blowing up and the pandemic was hitting, and that's what America felt like to me at the time.
Not welcoming.
Not at all. Well, I'm just going to say it, a pain in the ass at times too, Not to be crude, but really.
But you have something to say. And so did he.
That's also one of the newer pieces I did during COVID.
Is that a hornet's nest?
It is a hornet's nest. It's an original hornet's nest from South Arkansas. My uncle had got it when he was in the deer woods. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a hornet's nest." He goes, "Well, I've got one." I said, "Can I have it?" And I got it from him. And I carved the face that I saw on TV every single day with the stinging words and with the mouth coming open, like that's where the hornets would come out.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And
that's in the studio right now under a glass case.
We were discussing the Trump effect last time we talked about how anger is such an effective political tool.
Right.
And that it's a shame it drowns out reason, it drowns out emotion, it drowns out so much. You must feel like he's the worst thing that's happened in a long time.
Well, in my lifetime, yeah, I think he has been. And I'll tell you this, there's a big difference from getting all your news online and hearing all that stuff online. I mean, I'm saying online, through the television set, whatever, online,
right.
Whatever. We're just being inundated with it, and it's on purpose. Because when I talk to people individually, face to face, without all that stuff in the background, people were just people. We disagreed on stuff, and I know you're going to get some extremists out there, but I'm talking just the general population I talk to. They were nothing like what we see portrayed on television now.
Right.
And it's just because we're being inundated with this stuff, being brainwashed, inundated, everything else. But when you really talk to someone face to face and you make the effort, both of you are really making the effort to talk to one another, everything's fine. So it does give me hope,
right.
Even though we've got some weirdos out there, it really gives me hope because most people aren't like that.
Right.
So I'd like to also say that because of his fakeness a lot, this kind of plays into it, I think. I really struggled with the best way to do the veneers on the teeth. And so those are Lee press-on nails. And they were perfect.
That is funny.
It's just kind of a cosmetic thing, No.
So you miss the South much?
Oh, my God. I have that sauce shipped to my house to this day from Hot Springs, Arkansas. I have been eating at that barbecue place in Hot Springs since I was a child in a high chair. And I have many fond memories, and it's Bill Clinton's favorite barbecue place, too. They changed the menu when he had his first heart attack, so they'd have a little healthier menu for him. But it's the best barbecue sauce I've ever had.
And how's barbecue up here?
Y'all have barbecue up here?
Well, it passes. And lastly, this is very inspiring.
Yeah.
That's on your body.
It's right here.
And it's a little dark. Only in the darkness can you see the stars.
Mm-hmm.
That's like saying darkness before the light, or what does it mean to you?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. And I've got this done before I took the doors to the Lincoln Memorial. And so, like I said, the lady at whoever was running the phones at the governor's office was horrible. And so not only did I get a permit from the National Park Service to go, I went and got a tattoo also before I left. You know, it's interesting. When I took the doors back 2 years later after being there, it's kind of after, and that was after the election. I took them back to the Lincoln Memorial just to kind of test the waters and see what it was like.
Right.
And when I called the National Park Service on the phone after filling out the application, they said, "Well, hello, Miss Cox. It's good to see you again." They remembered the doors. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I'm going to throw it open to anybody who might want to have any questions, answers. Is there anybody who has any questions about?
I'll start with also being from the South. Living in New York has been a life-changing, mind-changing experience to hear how people talk about Jim Crow, how they talk about American history, but I don't do it for a living like you do. So has there been a big contrast for you in how people respond to your work, talk about your work up here versus down in Arkansas and the South?
Yes, when I first got here, I actually got a little pushback because it made people very uncomfortable up here. And I'm sure they're just not used to the extreme, subject matters, which we see every day in the South down there. And what people don't realize is that, well, first of all, I'd like to say as well, I was taught in high school, in history class, that the Civil War was fought over states' rights.
Yes.
They rarely talked about slavery. To this day, in rural communities, that is still being taught. So in the defense of some of the population down there, they just don't know any better. They're uneducated, they're not being taught properly, they don't know the history, and it's just been passed down generationally like this.
So we think it's like a recent ploy to drag people back, but you're saying it's actually never gone away.
It's never gone away, and it's just a mindset. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how they've been lied to, basically, as far as facts go.
Yeah.
But also things that happen in the South sets the precedence for a lot of the laws around the country. And people up here, I don't think, realize that. I mean, even the Fugitive Slave Act, the southern landowners and plantation owners pushed that all the way to the Canadian border.
Yep.
And there's a lot of money, a lot of dark money goes into those flyover states. And then that's where a lot of these places as well, the Heritage Foundation and all these other organizations, they throw everything against the wall as far as laws go just to see what will stick. And that way you're setting precedents. And then the laws will eventually start moving up and out across the nation. So we really need to pay attention to what's going on in the South.
So you're a hopeful person.
I am hopeful.
And you, what would be the way I would put this? You feel that art can make a difference.
The art, I can tell you, hands down, has crossed religious and political boundaries with ease. Compared to, I've never seen anything else do it like this. And it's not just the visual arts. I believe that music does it. I believe literature does it. But the arts definitely, and this is going to sound cliche, I think the arts can save us. I really do believe that.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Sharing
so much. Thank you. All right, I'm going to hand out cards for anybody that wants one.